I can't take this anymore. 3 times this month she's called the police on my children. My own children, claiming I kidnapped them because their skin is lighter than mine. Do you have any idea what it's like to have your kids terrified of playing in their own yard? To have officers pull guns on you while your children watch? I served this community for 15 years as an officer, and this is how I'm treated? Well, Karen, I've had enough. Today, you'll regret ever targeting my family. You think you know the law? I am the law, and today, justice comes for you. Before we continue, if you enjoy stories about standing up against discrimination and seeing justice served, make sure to click that subscribe button. This is the best way for you to support our work. Thank you very much, and let's continue. 6 months ago, Marcus Johnson retired from the Chicago Police Department after 15 years of dedicated service. A decorated officer with an impeccable record, Marcus had seen the department through its best and worst times. He joined the force with high ideals about community policing and building bridges between law enforcement and neighborhoods that historically distrusted the police. Over his career, he'd made a difference in mentoring at-risk youth, implementing community outreach programs, and even receiving a commendation from the mayor for de-escalating a potentially deadly hostage situation without firing a single shot. Marcus hadn't planned to retire at 42, but after his wife Alyssa passed away from breast cancer last year, his priorities shifted. Their twins, Elijah and Ella, needed him more than ever. At 10 years old, they were still processing the loss of their mother, and Marcus couldn't bear the thought of them losing their father too in the line of duty. So he turned in his badge, cashed out his pension, and decided to move his family to a quieter suburb where the kids could heal and grow in peace. The Johnson family settled into a beautiful colonial-style home in Oakwood Estates, an upscale neighborhood with excellent schools and safe streets. It was everything Marcus had worked for, a place where his children could thrive, where they could ride bikes and play without him worrying about gang violence or drive-by shootings. Most importantly, it was a fresh start away from the constant reminders of Alyssa's absence. Ella and Elijah were biracial. Marcus was black, and Alyssa had been white. The twins had inherited their mother's lighter complexion and hazel eyes, though Elijah had Marcus's curly hair. To Marcus, they were perfect reflections of the love he and Alyssa had shared, bridges between two worlds. The first few weeks in Oakwood Estates went smoothly. Marcus enrolled the kids in the local elementary school, where they quickly made friends. He joined the neighborhood association and introduced himself to most of the families on their street. Everyone seemed welcoming. Everyone except Patricia Winters, the middle-aged white woman who lived across the street. From day one, Patricia watched the Johnson family with suspicious eyes. When Marcus waved to her while mowing his lawn, she quickly looked away and hurried inside. When the twins played in the front yard, Patricia would often stand at her window, phone in hand, observing them intently. Marcus tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps she was just curious about the new neighbors. But something about her demeanor made him uneasy. His instincts proved correct when, just 3 weeks after moving in, Marcus heard a sharp knock at his door. He opened it to find 2 police officers standing on his porch, their expressions serious. "Good afternoon, sir," the taller officer said. "We received a call about a possible child abduction at this address. Someone reported seeing an adult male with 2 children who didn't appear to be related to him." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine but maintained his composure. 15 years on the force had taught him how to handle these situations. "Officers, those are my children. I'm Marcus Johnson, former CPD. I just moved here with my kids after retiring from the force." He invited them in and showed them family photos, the twins' birth certificates, and his police credentials. The officers, clearly embarrassed, apologized for the disturbance. Before they left, the younger officer discreetly mentioned that the call had come from a neighbor across the street. Marcus didn't need to ask which one. He hoped that would be the end of it, but 2 weeks later it happened again. This time, Marcus was at the park with Elijah and Ella when 3 police cruisers surrounded them, lights flashing. Someone had reported a man who had abducted 2 children and taken them to the park. Once again, Marcus had to explain who he was, show identification, and have his terrified children verify that he was indeed their father. After the officers left, Ella burst into tears. "Daddy, why do the police keep thinking you're kidnapping us?" Marcus held his daughter close, struggling to find the right words. How could he explain the ugly reality of racial profiling to a 10-year-old who'd already lost her mother? "Some people make wrong assumptions, sweetheart. They see that your skin is lighter than mine, and they don't understand that families can look different. But don't worry. The police know the truth now." But Patricia Winters wasn't done. The third incident happened just yesterday, when Marcus was helping the twins into his car for school. This time, the responding officers approached with hands hovering near their weapons, ordering Marcus to step away from the children and place his hands on the hood of his car. In front of the entire neighborhood, Marcus was handcuffed and questioned while his children watched in horror, tears streaming down their faces. It took nearly an hour to sort out the misunderstanding, with Marcus's former captain having to vouch for him over the phone. By then, the damage was done. Neighbors had gathered to watch the spectacle, whispering among themselves. The twins were late for school, traumatized and humiliated. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, nursing a glass of bourbon. His hands shook with suppressed rage and heartbreak. Elijah had asked if they could move again, somewhere people wouldn't think their daddy was a bad man. Ella had nightmares, waking up crying that the police were taking her father away. This wasn't the life he'd promised them after Alyssa died. This wasn't the safe haven they deserved. Marcus knew who was behind the calls. He'd seen Patricia watching from her window each time the police arrived, a satisfied expression on her face. But knowing wasn't enough. He needed proof. And he needed to end this harassment before his children suffered any more trauma. That's when Marcus decided to use his law enforcement experience to turn the tables on Patricia Winters. In most states, filing false police reports was a serious offense, potentially a felony. If he could prove she was deliberately making false claims, knowing they were untrue, she could face criminal charges. But he needed evidence, and he needed to be careful. Despite the injustice, he had to operate within the law. The next morning, Marcus called an old friend from the force, Detective Andre Wilson. After explaining the situation, Andre agreed to help. "This happens too often, brother. She picked the wrong family to mess with." Together, they formulated a plan. First, Marcus installed security cameras around his property, high-quality ones that captured both video and audio at a significant distance. He positioned them strategically to cover his yard, driveway, and portions of the street, making sure one had a clear view of Patricia's house. Everything was legal. The cameras only recorded public spaces and his own property. Next, he documented every incident meticulously, creating a file with dates, times, responding officers, and witness statements. He collected statements from neighbors who had witnessed the police confrontations, many of whom were outraged on his behalf once they understood what was happening. Marcus also reached out to the police department that serviced Oakwood Estates. He explained his situation to the chief, who was appalled that someone was weaponizing his officers against a former colleague. The chief promised to flag any future calls about the Johnson residence for special handling and agreed to cooperate with Marcus's plan to catch Patricia in the act. With everything in place, Marcus was ready to spring his trap. On Saturday morning, he had Andre come over with his two sons, who were friends with the twins from before the move. The children played in the front yard under Marcus's supervision, being deliberately louder than usual, laughing, shouting, and having water balloon fights. Marcus knew Patricia would be watching, and he wanted to give her every opportunity to make another call. Sure enough, within 30 minutes, Patricia appeared on her porch, phone in hand. Marcus's security cameras captured her taking photos of the children and making a call while pointing at his yard. 20 minutes later, 2 police cruisers pulled up, but instead of rushing in with lights and sirens as before, they parked calmly at the curb. The officers approached Marcus with respectful nods. They were in on the plan, having been briefed by their chief. One officer spoke loudly enough for the security cameras to pick up. "Mr. Johnson, we received another call about potential child abduction at this address." The caller stated that an adult male who doesn't appear related to several children is holding them against their will. Marcus played his part perfectly. "Officers, these are my children, Elijah and Ella, and their friends. who were here for a playdate with their father, Detective Wilson from CPD. Andre stepped forward, showing his badge, as the children watched curiously, aware that this was different from the previous confrontations. "Sir," the caller was quite insistent. The officer continued, suppressing a smile. "She claims she's certain you don't live here and that these aren't your children. Would you mind if we verify that with you and the children?" "Not at all," Marcus replied calmly. After a brief, friendly conversation with the kids that confirmed everything was fine, the officers turned to leave, then paused dramatically. "Sir, this is the fourth call we've received about this address. Do you have any idea who might be making these false reports?" Marcus pointed to Patricia's house. "I believe my neighbor has been making these calls. I've documented the previous incidents, and I have security footage of her watching my family and making calls each time the police arrive." "That's a serious allegation," the officer said, loud enough for Patricia to hear from her porch, where she still stood watching. "Filing false police reports is a criminal offense. If someone is repeatedly making false claims, they could face charges." "I understand," Marcus replied. "I'd like to file a formal complaint and provide my evidence to your department." The officers nodded and made a show of taking notes before returning to their cruisers. Part 1 of the plan had been executed flawlessly. That evening, Marcus hosted a small neighborhood barbecue in his backyard. He invited several families from the block, including the ones whose children attended school with the twins. Conspicuously absent from the invitation list was Patricia Winters. As the adults chatted and the children played, Marcus subtly guided the conversation toward the police visits. His neighbors expressed shock and dismay when he explained what had been happening. "Every time, the same person calls and reports that I've kidnapped my own children," Marcus explained, his voice carrying across the fence to Patricia's yard, where she was gardening within earshot. "The police have been understanding, but it's traumatizing for my kids. Imagine having officers approach your father with hands on their weapons, thinking he might have abducted you." "That's horrible," said Sarah Chon, a doctor whose daughter was in Ella's class. "Who would do such a thing?" "I have my suspicions," Marcus replied, glancing meaningfully toward Patricia's yard. "The calls always come when a certain neighbor is watching us. I've installed security cameras for protection, and they've captured some interesting footage." The neighbors followed his gaze to Patricia, who quickly retreated inside her house. The seed had been planted. The next morning, Marcus took the final step in his plan. He walked across the street and knocked on Patricia's door. His security cameras and a body camera borrowed from Andre were recording everything. After a long pause, Patricia opened the door just enough to peer out, her face a mask of suspicion and disdain. "What do you want?" she demanded. "Good morning, Ms. Winters," Marcus said pleasantly. "I'm Marcus Johnson from across the street. I don't think we've been properly introduced since I moved in." "I know who you are," she replied coldly. "Then you know I live here with my children, Elijah and Ella," Marcus continued, maintaining his calm demeanor. "I've noticed you watching us quite often, and I believe you may have some concerns about my family. I thought it might be helpful if we cleared the air." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you're talking about. Ms. Winters, the police have visited my home 4 times in the past month, each time responding to calls about a potential child abduction. Each time, the calls came when you were observing my family. It's creating a difficult situation for my children, who've already lost their mother. Are you accusing me of something?" Patricia's voice rose defensively. "I'm giving you an opportunity to explain," Marcus replied evenly. "As a former police officer, I understand the importance of community safety and reporting suspicious activity. But these reports are false, and they're harming innocent children. Those children don't look anything like you," Patricia blurted out, then caught herself. "Not that I've been watching, but anyone could see they can't be yours." Marcus had her now. Her statement confirmed what he'd suspected. She was making assumptions based solely on the different skin tones between him and his biracial children. "Ms. Winters, Elijah, and Ella are my biological children. Their mother was white. She passed away last year from cancer." For a moment, something like uncertainty flickered across Patricia's face. but it quickly hardened into resolve. I don't believe you. People like you are always coming into nice neighborhoods like this and causing trouble. I'm just looking out for those children. People like me? Marcus raised an eyebrow. You mean former police officers? Homeowners? Widowed fathers? You know what I mean. Patricia hissed, her mask slipping further. And don't think I don't see what you're doing with those cameras. You can't intimidate me. I know my rights. As do I, Marcus replied calmly, including my right not to have false police reports filed against me. I'm giving you a chance to stop this behavior now, before it escalates further. The next time the police come to my house because of a false report, I'll be pressing charges and providing evidence that you've been systematically harassing my family. Patricia's face flushed with anger. Are you threatening me? I'll call the police right now. That's your right, Marcus said. Just be sure to tell them the truth this time. With that, he turned and walked back to his house, leaving Patricia seething on her doorstep. Later that day, Andre called with news. The police department had reviewed Marcus's evidence and found it compelling enough to open an investigation into Patricia for filing false reports. They would be visiting her that afternoon to question her formally. Marcus watched from his window as two officers approached Patricia's house around 4 p.m. They spoke with her on the porch for several minutes, their expressions growing increasingly stern as Patricia became more agitated. Eventually, they handed her something, likely a citation or court summons, before returning to their vehicle. The next morning, Marcus received a call from the district attorney's office. After reviewing the evidence, including Marcus's security footage, the body camera recording of his conversation with Patricia, and the documentation of previous false reports, they had decided to charge Patricia Winters with filing false police reports, misuse of emergency services, and harassment. Given the racial component of her targeting, they were also considering hate crime enhancements. The prosecutor explained that Patricia had essentially confessed during her interview with the police, claiming she was just trying to protect the neighborhood, and making several racist statements that strengthened the case against her. She was scheduled for arraignment the following week. News traveled fast in Oakwood Estates. By evening, Marcus's phone was buzzing with text messages and calls from neighbors expressing support and outrage at Patricia's behavior. Sarah Chen organized a neighborhood watch meeting specifically to address racial profiling and how to build a more inclusive community. The HOA president personally visited Marcus to apologize for the harassment his family had endured and promised to implement anti-discrimination policies for the neighborhood. A week later, Marcus and Andre sat in the courtroom as Patricia Winters was arraigned on multiple charges. She looked small and defeated in her business attire, nothing like the intimidating figure who had terrorized Marcus's family for a month. When the judge denied her attorney's request to dismiss the charges and set a substantial bail amount due to the persistent and malicious nature of the offenses, Patricia broke down in tears. Outside the courthouse, a local news crew approached Marcus for comment. Initially reluctant, he realized this was an opportunity to turn a painful experience into something positive. With the twins at school and protected from the media attention, he agreed to a brief interview. What happened to my family is unfortunately not unique, Marcus explained to the reporter. Many families of color face suspicion and harassment simply for existing in spaces where others think they don't belong. As a former police officer, I understood how to document the abuse and work within the system to seek justice, but many victims don't have those advantages. What would you say to others who might be in similar situations? The reporter asked. Know your rights. Document everything. Build relationships with your neighbors and community. And remember that most people are good and will stand with you against injustice when they understand what's happening. I've been overwhelmed by the support from our neighborhood since the truth came out. In the weeks that followed, Patricia Winters put her house up for sale and moved away before her trial, accepting a plea deal that included probation, community service, and mandatory diversity training. The story gained national attention, sparking discussions about racial profiling in residential communities and the weaponization of police calls against people of color. Marcus was invited to speak at community forums and police training sessions about his experience on both sides of the badge. He established a nonprofit organization that provided legal support and resources for families facing racial harassment in their neighborhoods. The twins, though initially shaken by the ordeal, found strength in the outpouring of support from their community and began to feel truly at home in Oakwood Estates. 6 months after the final confrontation with Patricia, Marcus sat on his porch watching Elijah and Ella play basketball in the driveway with neighborhood friends. The security cameras remained, but they no longer felt like necessary protection, just a prudent precaution from a former officer who understood the world's dangers. Sarah Chun waved from the sidewalk as she walked her dog past the house. Beautiful evening, isn't it? We're still on for the neighborhood picnic this weekend, right? Wouldn't miss it, Marcus called back with a genuine smile. The kids have been practicing for the three-legged race all week. As Sarah continued her walk, Marcus reflected on how differently things might have turned out if he hadn't had the knowledge and resources to fight back against Patricia's harassment. Would his family have been forced to move? Would the twins have grown up believing they weren't welcome in certain neighborhoods because of how their family looked? Would he have lost faith in the community he'd sworn to protect for 15 years? Instead, Patricia's hate had backfired spectacularly. Her attempts to drive the Johnson family away had only cemented their place in the community and sparked positive change throughout the neighborhood. The twins were thriving in school, making friends, and healing from the loss of their mother. Marcus had found purpose in helping other families face similar challenges. In the end, justice had been served not through vengeance or escalation, but through the patient, methodical application of truth and law. Marcus had made Patricia regret her actions not by lowering himself to her level, but by rising above it and allowing her own hatred to be her downfall. As the sun set over Oakwood Estates, Marcus called the twins in for dinner. They raced each other to the porch, breathless and laughing, secure in the knowledge that this was their home, their community, and no one could take that away from them. "Dad, can we have ice cream after dinner?" Elijah asked hopefully. "Please," Ella added, giving her best puppy dog eyes. "We finished all our homework already." Marcus pretended to consider it seriously, then broke into a grin. "I think that can be arranged." As the three of them headed inside, a new family was moving into Patricia's old house across the street. A young interracial couple with a toddler, looking nervous but hopeful as they carried boxes from their moving truck. Marcus made a mental note to welcome them properly tomorrow. Maybe bring over one of Ella's famous batches of welcome cookies. After all, this was a neighborhood where everyone belonged, where families looked out for each other, and where justice prevailed over prejudice. It had taken work and pain to make it that way, but Marcus wouldn't have it any other way. That night, as Marcus tucked the twins into bed, Ella asked a question that caught him off guard. "Daddy, are you glad we moved here, even after what that mean lady did?" Marcus sat on the edge of her bed, considering his answer carefully. "Yes, sweetheart, I am. Sometimes when bad things happen, they lead to good changes. Because of what happened with Ms. Winters, our whole neighborhood came together. We made new friends and helped make this a better place to live. Not just for us, but for everyone. Like how when Mom got sick, she said it helped her see how much love was all around us." Ella asked, her young mind making connections that still astonished Marcus. He felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Exactly like that, baby girl. Your mom would be so proud of how brave you and your brother have been. I wish she could see our new house," Elijah said from his bed across the room. "I think she can," Marcus replied softly. "And I think she's happy we found a place where we can be ourselves and be accepted for exactly who we are." As the twins drifted off to sleep, Marcus stood in the hallway between their rooms, overwhelmed with gratitude. Despite the challenges, despite the hatred they'd faced, his family had found their place in the world. They were home, and for a man who had spent his career fighting for justice in a broken system, who had lost the love of his life too soon, who had faced down bigotry to protect his children, that sense of belonging was the sweetest victory of all. In the quiet darkness of his suburban home, Marcus Johnson finally felt at peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, new chances to build the world he wanted his children to inherit. But tonight, in this moment, it was enough to know that they were safe, they were loved, and they had claimed their rightful place in a community that now embraced them fully. Patricia Winters had tried to make them feel like outsiders, like impostors in their own home. Instead, she had only strengthened their bonds to this place and these people. In trying to drive them away, she had secured their place here forever. Justice, Marcus reflected as he headed to his own room, sometimes works in mysterious ways, but it always, eventually, arrives for those patient and determined enough to stand their ground. And that was a lesson worth teaching his children, a legacy worth leaving behind.